По нам пиздуют, сука!
Я викупаю, в окопі орки, а я один. Дуже було проблематично. І що я зробив? Я вибіжав з окопа, позвав своїх двох товаришів, і ми вдвоєм туди вривали, троєм туди вривались.
This soldier belongs to Ukraine's K2 battalion, an elite military unit that has gained notoriety in the bloody war against the powerful Russian nation. And he's not talking about a dream in which he was fighting with creepy fantasy beings. This is something much more real, brutal, and terrifying. The orcs are Moscow's soldiers, those who have killed many of their comrades and lurk in every trench waiting for the opportunity to attack. The conflict continues to spread, but the violence does not end. The number of victims is increasing, and as long as neither army is willing to take a step back, the corpses will continue to pile up on the battlefield. In this new video from Military Force, we will once again delve into the war between Russians and Ukrainians to discover new secrets through the testimonies of its own protagonists. We will learn where the most offensive nicknames of the conflict come from and some of the most action-packed moments experienced by the combatants.
Ти заді мене, я йду.
Since the beginning of the Russian invasion on February 24, 2022, there have been reports of human rights abuses, massive destruction of civilian infrastructure, looting, and behavior that the international community considers barbaric. This brutality has led Ukrainian soldiers and citizens to dehumanize Kremlin fighters, using the term orcs to refer to them. In this way, the image of them as a destructive and ruthless force, devoid of morals, is reinforced. Now, to understand the origin of the word, we must understand the relationship with the literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien, who created a fantasy world with evil and cruel creatures at the service of a dark power. In The Lord of the Rings, his most recognized work, orcs are that character without ethics or humanity, who are only used as a tool of conquest and devastation. In many conflicts, it is common for derogatory terms to be used to talk about the enemy. In this case, many Ukrainians have compared Russia to Mordor, the land of evil in Tolkien's works. This fictional place is seen as a center of oppressive power from which armies of destruction are sent, something that in Kyiv they see reflected in the imperialist policies of the Kremlin and the authoritarian nature of Putin's government. In this analogy, Russian soldiers become the orcs who blindly obey their dark master. Furthermore, this nickname helps to complete a narrative in which a struggle between good and evil is posed. The use of the word strengthens the collective identity in times of war, where Ukrainians see themselves as heroes defending their home, freedom and democracy against a ruthless invader who wants to impose his dominance.
Братан, падай, падай, падай!
However, this kind of dehumanization of the enemy achieved through the term orc can also have negative effects. The nickname is used not only by Ukrainian soldiers in the field, but also by the entire society, including politicians, officials, and even President Volodymyr Zelensky himself. In this way, it reinforces a level of hatred that may hinder the possibility of reconciliation in the future. By reducing Russian troops to creatures devoid of humanity, the ability to recognize the complexity of the conflict and the individual tragedies experienced by those involved, whether on one side or the other, is eliminated.
Ну вон трупов куча.
The war is just as cruel for both Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, but that won't stop hatred from continuing to be generated behind the idea that one side is good and the other bad. For that reason, the conflict will continue with the same brutality that has been shown so far. This invites us to bring new, terrifying situations that the protagonists of the battle experience day by day. On this occasion, we will be able to learn about some of the most shocking moments of the war from the point of view of the members of the Ukrainian K2 battalion. This outstanding unit is part of the country's armed forces, specifically within the 54th Mechanized Brigade, one of the most active in the conflict. Because of that, the battalion has been involved in several of the main defensive and offensive operations by the Kyiv Army, especially in the Donbass region, which includes highly disputed areas such as Bakhmut and other towns near the front lines. The K2 is known for its use of armored vehicles and modern warfare tactics. Its operations are often coordinated with artillery units and missile systems, allowing it to carry out precise strikes against Russian forces. It has also shown great skill in using drones for reconnaissance and targeted attacks. But in such a violent and savage war, every strategy always has its pros and cons, as one of these soldiers explains.
Є плюс в піхоті, що чому проще бути піхотинцем, ти стоїш якби в обороні, в окопі. А штурмувати чому мінус? Ти в повний рост ідеш і по тобі все працює. Артилерія, тобто, і вже, виходить, русські сидять в окопах. Наш, коли ситуація ми вибиваємо так, з окопів русських. Це тяжко, бо вони вже сидять в окопах і по тобі стріляють. І ще їхні дрони, і артилерія працює.
Throughout the conflict, K2 battalion fighters have shared videos and testimonies of their operations on social media, which has helped increase their visibility and image as a highly effective unit on the battlefield. These posts have also served to inspire morale among Ukrainian citizens. One of the examples to demonstrate this is an operation in which they managed to repel an assault by Russian forces in the Donetsk region. The unit publicized the confrontation that began with the arrival of an enemy convoy that was advancing towards Ukrainian positions until it came across a minefield. The Kremlin's armored vehicles were surprised by the fierce detonations that forced them to stop after losing 2 of their vehicles. The K2 battalion had managed to prepare the ground with explosives the night before the offensive by means of drones, and now they had the adversary right where they wanted it. The artillery of the local defenses began to fire on the rivals' tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. As a result of the attack, the Russians lost another of their tanks. However, the Moscow infantrymen were not ready to give up and began to advance on the terrain under the cover of the tanks that were still standing.
Монтер, пардон, на прием. Тоже передай, что это пидоры, пусть они там в полном БГ, как принял прием.
The exchange of fire lasted for several minutes until the Russians realized that their assault had failed and decided to abandon the area. However, the tanks retreated so quickly that they left part of their infantry troops without support as they continued on the field heading towards the Ukrainian positions. Unprotected, the Kremlin soldiers were exposed to the drones of the K2 battalion, which patiently prepared well-targeted attacks against their enemies.
Їх двоє, два. Щас. Вичекай момент. Щас двох підійдуть і можете монстра побачити.
In total, during the failed offensive, Russian forces lost 5 units of military equipment, while 34 fighters were killed. This is one of many engagements in which the K2 battalion has participated. Although the unit is deeply remembered for its defense of Bakhmut during the intense fighting. Russian armed forces, supported by mercenaries from the Wagner Group and separatist militias from Donbass, tried to capture the town for months in the hope of breaking through Ukrainian lines and advancing west. The K2, along with other Russian units, dug in and endured a relentless siege. Day after day, under the constant roar of artillery, the soldiers repelled attacks, resisting with a ferocity that baffled their enemies. The battalion's armored vehicles, covered in dust and shrapnel, roamed the destroyed streets, providing crucial support to the infantry in urban fighting. These men were fighting not only for Bakhmut, but for every inch of Ukrainian soil. The town was the bloodiest scene of the war so far, due to the number of casualties suffered by both sides. However, thanks to the efforts of local troops, it became a symbol of resistance. Russian forces could not break the spirit of the K2 battalion, which, despite the extreme conditions and brutality of the siege, continued to fight with inexplicable tenacity. The courage and determination of this unit prevented Bakhmut from falling for months, giving other Ukrainian troops time to reorganize and launch counteroffensives in different areas of the front. However, to achieve this, it also had to face enormous challenges and face death on more than one occasion.
Осколок мне в щеку залетел. Це був третій штурм как раз на Тешке. Мы подлетели до Тешки, высадились, и по нам прилетело Краснополе. Індивідуальний перев'язочний пакет. Він мені 2 рази життя спас. Точніше, 1 раз мені, а другий раз побратиму.
There is no doubt that the K2 battalion has demonstrated an unrivaled combination of courage and military discipline in taking on a much larger and well-equipped army. However, that ability to adapt in order to withstand a prolonged conflict against Russia also came at a high cost. Moscow's overwhelming numerical and technological superiority has had a strong impact throughout the invasion. Vladimir Putin's army may not have been able to subdue and conquer its neighbor in a matter of weeks or months as expected, but that does not mean it has not dealt hard blows. Ukrainian losses were also felt in the K2 battalion, so the members of this symbol of resistance have more than one reason to fight. This is how one of the unit's commanders explains what it feels like when a comrade dies in combat.
Це дуже важко. Якщо чесно, дуже багато командирів бояться саме цього. Відповідальності за своїх бійців. А те, як у нас колектив маленький, вони всі мені брати. І коли йдуть втрати, я дуже тяжко це переживаю.
As we can see, and like many other Ukrainian units, the K2 has suffered losses throughout the conflict. The brutal and merciless war has claimed the lives of many of its brave fighters. But what distinguishes these troops is not only their combat ability, but their unbreakable spirit. Despite the casualties and hardships, the battalion has maintained its cohesion and determination to defend Ukraine until the end. This attitude has been fueled both by the desire to protect their homeland and by a deep sense of camaraderie among its members. As this commander explained, his soldiers do not fight only for the flag of their country, but also for the comrades who are at their side, for the friends and family who await their return.
Братан, вони отам справа. Кричи по-русски, кричи по-русски. Свои!
Amidst the destruction, stories of heroism and sacrifice abound. Warriors who risked their lives to save their comrades, units that held out under constant bombardment, and leaders who inspired their men to keep fighting when all seemed lost. This is how the battalion continues to venture into every battle scenario, no matter how challenging. The fear exists, but the spirit to keep fighting is greater.
Приход рядом!
conflict seems far from over, and the days continue to feel like hell for Ukraine's forces. Russian troops are determined to continue to launch constant artillery bombardments alongside fierce ground assault attempts. This is the challenge that once again finds the men of the K2 battalion at the center of the battle. Despite fatigue, cold, and a lack of supplies at times, the unit holds its own. Once again, mechanized tactics and the use of technology such as drones prove decisive. Kyiv's soldiers use their armored vehicles to launch lightning counterattacks, surprising Moscow's fighters at their weakest points. At night, the battalion's reconnaissance and saboteur units infiltrate enemy lines, demoralizing the invaders and collecting vital information that is then used to direct artillery strikes.
Ух ты, нихуя. Давай, давай. Давай, братан. Давай, давай, давай. Братан, по нас плотно 120. Сюда, сюда, сюда.
As we near the end, we can assure you that as long as this brutal conflict continues, the K2 battalion will continue to play a crucial role in military operations against the Russian orcs. Its bravery, skill, and resilience have made it a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. Future generations will look back and remember the exploits of this unit as an integral part of the fight for freedom and independence of their country. The K2 has not only defended its territory, but has shown the world that the strength of an army does not always lie in its size or its equipment, but in the heart and determination of those who fight for what they feel is right. In this duel against a gigantic enemy, the battalion stands out as a steel shield and a beacon of hope.
Лягай, вогонь! На 12! На 12!
Right on target. The Serebryansky forest suddenly becomes the scene of a fierce confrontation that could change the course of the war in eastern Ukraine. The world-renowned and feared 12th Azov Brigade is preparing to prove once again that the Ukrainian resistance is unbeatable. With a bold plan, they seek to launch a decisive assault against the Russian positions hidden in the dense foliage of the forest. What they don't know is that the enemy is waiting for them, entrenched in the shadows, ready for a lethal ambush. This confrontation in the forest is not just another battle. It is a fight that will define the resistance of both sides. In this spectacular video, you will learn about a key operation of the Azov Brigade, where you will experience minute by minute the assault on a Russian trench system. Get ready to witness one of the most epic battles of contemporary warfare. Let's get started.
Плюс пішла мощно. Укриття! Граната! Блядь, проблема, проблема. Сука. Хорошо.
Since its founding on May 5, 2014, the Azov Brigade has played a crucial role in the defense of Ukraine. Initially formed by volunteers, this unit has evolved into one of the most trained and feared forces in the Ukrainian army, formally joining the National Guard. During the conflict that began in Donbass and led to the current brutal war, Azov gained notoriety for its combat efficiency, especially in urban battles and guerrilla operations. The contest between Russia and Ukraine, which began on February 24, 2022, and still has no end in sight, is not just a battle for territory. It is an existential struggle for Kyiv. The fighting on the Eastern Front, where Russian forces have concentrated many of their attacks, is brutal and continuous. There, in this modern trench warfare, the Azov Brigade is not only fighting for the survival of its nation, but also to prove that this country can resist the Russian giant. Today, we will explore in detail a key operation in the Serebryansky forest, where on August 23, 2024, soldiers of the 12th Brigade carried out a carefully planned combat mission with the aim of recapturing positions held by the enemy. Let's start by listening to one of the protagonists of this video, Major Arsen Lemko Dmitro, commander of the Azov Brigade.
Нам потрібно було стабілізувати ситуацію, яка була на межі критичної в лісі.
The appointed day arrives. The first rays of dawn are just beginning to stain the horizon as the soldiers of the Azov Brigade silently prepare. The air is thick with moisture, and the Serebryansky forest looms like a dark, dense labyrinth, full of traps and ambushes. The soldiers are divided into small assault teams that will be backed up by the brigade's artillery, in case the enemy's defenses are strengthened. Each soldier is well equipped. Many of them carry M4 rifles, extra ammunition, grenades, and communications equipment. Although the forces are ready for any eventuality, the faces of the fighters reflect total concentration. They know that every mission on this front is a matter of life or death. A low, almost imperceptible sound marks the beginning of the advance of the first assault teams. The footsteps of the Azov soldiers move in tight formation, moving between the trees and avoiding any noise that would give away their position. The objective is about 300 meters away. Although it seems like only a few steps away, a recently reinforced Russian trench system stretches along the hill, flanked by half-buried bunkers. They have been precisely constructed. The earth is compacted and the underground shelters are designed to withstand artillery. Previous intelligence reports indicate that this sector is a key piece in the enemy defenses, and its fall could weaken the entire front line in the region.
Оголошували старшим групам, бійцям, командирам з водіїв, що нам головне, не потрібно було втратити темп. Це саме основне було. Ми ставили акцент на швидкості. Тобто вся операція по наших рахунках повинна була зайняти до 3 годин.
The soldiers reach the first line of approach undetected. Ordered to attack in coordinated groups, the reconnaissance team sends a signal to the Ukrainian gunners in the rear. A few seconds later, the sky lights up as the first grenades explode near the Russian trenches, creating initial confusion among the invaders. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Azov teams advance rapidly. The explosions disorganize the Russian defenses, and the first assault team from Kyiv moves with deadly speed. The initial direct contact occurs when the Azov vanguard team enters the trenches. The Russians, surprised by the attack, try to react by firing from the defensive positions, but are overwhelmed by the speed and strength of the Kyiv soldiers. Within a few minutes, the Azov Brigade has neutralized several Russian posts and continues to advance along the trenches.
Увага, увага!
Давай, вогонь.
Постріл! Понеслась, прием. Концерт по заявкам, начали.
A Russian soldier, stunned and disoriented by the attack, attempts to throw a grenade but is shot down before he can even throw it. The fighting is brutal, and casualties are mounting quickly on both sides. The crossfire intensifies as Russian reinforcements try to organize a defense in the deeper trenches. Azov soldiers remain on the move constantly, throwing hand grenades and using their automatic rifles to push the Russians back. Ukrainian artillery continues to pound the more distant positions, preventing the Kremlin men from receiving reinforcements from the rear. At this point, those enemy soldiers attempt to respond with mortar fire from an elevated point. Explosions shake the ground around the trenches, but Azov's teams are well dispersed and manage to avoid most direct hits. The Ukrainians take control of the first line of defenses. The remaining Russians in this section, outnumbered and outgunned, try to retreat to deeper positions. However, the Azov soldiers give no respite and have an ingenious way of repelling enemy attacks. Mines.
Лінії фронту. Ми повинні були зайти, відволікти на себе ворога, провести там бій, зачистити певну ділянку, потім там закріпитись, замінувати її і по ітозі, коли вже інша група штурмова, основна, закріпиться, зробить цю роботу, зачистить, закріпиться, почне окапуватись. Там хтось і був.
The Ukrainian artillery team is ordered to adjust its fire towards the enemy positions further away. The shells continue to fall with deadly precision, further demoralizing the Russian defenders. The advance is unstoppable. In a tactical pause, the Azov teams regroup their forces and review the captured positions. The soldiers under Putin's command, unable to stop the attack, have left behind defensive ditches that are now under Ukrainian control. The Russians had built a strong system that had served as a refuge, and now the Kiev army had to explore it and confirm that there were no surprises along the way.
Сука, там бійниця, блядь.
Справа бійниця, справа зліва.
Зліва бійниця.
Стоп. Червоний, проходив. Рухаюся.
Плюс. Я тримаю ліво. Давай.
Граната?
Чітко.
The Azov advance continues to hold firm, with Ukrainian artillery supporting from the rear and chaos reigning among the Russian ranks. The soldiers manage to take the last forward positions. The Russian defenders, overwhelmed by the force of the assault, try to reorganize and counterattack. With the trenches captured and secured, the Azov forces begin the process of fortifying the new positions. The Russian prisoners are taken into custody to a safe area, although the enemy fire does not seem to cease.
Я прокидав гранату, да. Продовжуємо рух, коп чистий. Все, жди. Щас, давай. Тримай.
The Azov soldiers, though exhausted, feel a renewed sense of purpose. They know that every meter gained represents a step toward defending their homeland, but that in every trench passage there is a bloodthirsty Russian. Concentration shifts to restructuring and strengthening their positions. The brigade receives reinforcements and new supplies. Transport vehicles arrive with additional provisions and equipment. Logistics are critical in these types of operations, and the ability to maintain a fluid line can make the difference between life and death on the battlefield. The arrival of new soldiers further boosts the brigade's morale. They know that, although the fight is not over, they have the backing they need to face any eventuality. As the reinforcements come together, the Azov commander calls a quick meeting. The plan is clear. They must take advantage of this first successful attack and continue to press the enemy. Every man and woman in the brigade knows that, although their faces are dirty and stained with blood, their spirit is indomitable.
Контролю прямо. Контролю прямо. Самаха, поможи Арті, я заберу твій сектор.
Надо граната, надо граната. Плюс. Півпав.
A tense silence falls over the forest, but the Azov fighters remain vigilant, ready to respond to any sign of danger. Experience has taught the soldiers that calm on the battlefield can be deceptive, and tranquility can precede a storm. Suddenly, a group advances to the east where Russian movements are observed in the distance. The brigade prepares for a possible counterattack. The artillery, strategically placed, is ready to respond to any attempt to recover by the Russian forces. The soldiers take up defensive positions, with rifles pointed towards the horizon. The tension in the air is palpable. Everyone knows that the battle is not over, and that the fight for control of this area is vital to the security of their country. The silence is broken when a group of Russian vehicles appears on the road. The Azov brigade remains in position, waiting for the commander's order to open fire. Patience is key at this moment. The soldiers must wait for the right moment to maximize the impact of their attack. With a cry of "Fire!", Azov soldiers begin firing. Artillery hurls shells at the Russian positions, and the echoes of the explosions reverberate through the forest. The attack is swift and devastating. Russian vehicles are hit and enemy soldiers are left at a disadvantage. Suddenly, chaos takes over the battlefield. Azov members, moving with determination, advance towards the enemy in a coordinated attack. The ground shakes with the impact of the explosions, and the air fills with smoke and gunpowder. Every soldier feels the adrenaline rush through his body. The bravery of the 12th Special Forces Brigade shines through at this critical moment. They run, shooting and throwing grenades, determined to protect their land and their loved ones. The battle turns into a fierce exchange of fire, where courage and strategy are tested at every second. As enemy fire subsides, Azov soldiers manage to take control of another section of the Russian positions. The once fortified trenches are now a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. The flag flutters in the wind as soldiers shout in jubilation, celebrating their victory. Russian prisoners are led away to safety. The brigade has demonstrated its ability not only to attack, but also to capture and hold the enemy. This success is crucial for the future operations of the Ukrainian forces.
Взяти 4 ворожі позиції, В ході проведення наступальної операції особовий склад 12-ї бригади спеціального призначення «Азов» проявив себе рішуче, мужньо та вкрай професійно. Нашими силами в ході стрілецьких боїв та вогнем артилерії було знищено 13 військовослужбовців противника, 12 було поранено та 2 взято в полон. Після чого вони були передані відповідним структурам для подальших обмінів. По завершенню операції нам вдалося покращити тактичне положення на глибину до 400 метрів та 500 метрів по лінії фронту.
Russian casualties amount to 25. This is a significant number for this type of fighting. It is time to consolidate control over the captured terrain and prepare new offensives. While the fortification teams work, communication between units remains active. Azov leaders send reports to their superiors, highlighting the success of the operation, enemy casualties, and the capture of prisoners. Every detail counts in the grand strategy of war. Despite the accumulated fatigue, the fighting spirit remains alive.
Своїми рексами хлопці відпрацювали на відмінно, всі на ура, і дуже приємно чути, що навіть хлопці, які отримали поранення, неодноразово говорять, що командор, ми швидко застаємо.
With control of the Serebryansky forest in their hands, the Azov Brigade prepares to advance towards new victories. This operation not only improves their tactical position, it also sends a powerful message to the enemy. The Ukrainian resistance is fierce and determined. The mission on August 23, 2024, represents not only a military success, but also a testament to the courage, determination, and professionalism of the Azov Battalion. Every soldier who participated in this fight has become a symbol of the national struggle. Their ability to carry out such a bold and effective mission proves that, despite the odds, Ukraine can resist and take back what belongs to it. With every meter gained and every position secured, the Azov Brigade is not only fighting for its land, but also for the freedom and dignity of its people. The history of this battle will be remembered as a heroic chapter in the war, a representation of what it means to fight for sovereignty in a world where aggression knows no bounds.
What was the last thing you saw before it hit and the video ended?
Він мене чув, і він намагався не рухатись, щоб я його не побачив.
What's the feeling when you hit your target?
Відчуття виконаного обов'язку.
This Ukrainian drone pilot is proud of his job. From his command post, located in a classified and highly protected area, the young man guides dozens of silent ships every day that search for Russian troops like relentless bloodhounds.
Is flying free, searching for something to destroy.
Once it detects its target, there's no way to escape from these modern kamikazes. The drone crashes into the victim, tearing it to pieces. Not only that, but it also captures on camera the enemy's final moments, just as the unmanned craft makes contact with its body.
Ти дійсно почуваєш себе птахом. В кінці взривається. Це ж просто неймовірно.
In this new installment of military force, we are going to accompany these 21st century pilots in their brutal hunt from a distance. We warn you that this story does not end well for the Russian soldiers. What you are seeing on screen is a Ukrainian team of drone pilots arriving at their base of operations. The work begins early, before the sun has finished positioning itself in the sky. Darkness is always a desirable cover for these men. Beyond the technology necessary to handle the miniature ships, the essential provision that this group requires are the explosives that transform simple flying machines into destructive machines that detonate upon contact with a target. It is not just any weapon. These are devices that allow for stealthy and personalized tracking, almost like trained missiles that obey their master. The Russians can try to hide behind a tree or in the depths of a trench, but in the sky of Ukraine there are kamikaze lookouts ready to swoop in. The material is shocking, but this is how war is lived in Europe. Unmanned aircraft have gained a reputation as the spearhead for Kyiv's troops, and the results speak for themselves. Deaths caused by drones have increased exponentially, and their production is becoming increasingly cheaper compared to other, more ostentatious resources, such as missiles or artillery pieces. Among the units that became a reference in this new facet of war, the Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Brigade of Ukraine stands out. Its soldiers are among the most experienced pilots of these Hunter aircraft and have professionalized the role to a level never seen before. If there is one thing that this bloody war will leave as a legacy, it is the incredible advance in terms of remote attacks and the unmanned devices that are used in these missions. But not everything is innovation. There is also a large dose of survival and practicality. These pilots had to learn to repair these machines using scarce resources and spare parts from destroyed machinery. The result is a hybrid force that combines the best of technology with human ingenuity. The important thing is not that the device looks elegant or futuristic, but that it is able to enter small nooks and crannies to kill the enemy. This is the point of view of a drone that was directed towards the hiding place of a Russian soldier. This plastic and metal bird entered through a window to annihilate its target. At a safe distance, a second device recorded the moment when the Kremlin's soldier transformed into a cloud of dust. With surgical precision, the Hunter entered the abandoned house, finishing off the potential threat in seconds. Another point for the relentless Achilles Battalion. A curious fact is that one of the operational centers of this brigade is an old Russian ammunition warehouse that was captured.
The Achilles Battalion of Ukraine's 92nd Brigade owns it now. So sensitive its location, they won't even tell us where we are on the map.
Since June 2023, propaganda videos presented by both the Ukrainian and Russian defense ministries have had a great impact on expert opinion. These are first-person footage captured by the cameras of drones that armies use to annihilate the enemy, images that create a new and brutal way of understanding and visualizing war. The narrative changes when you can see the exact moment when a machine operated several kilometers away hits a soldier's body and blows it into 1,000 pieces. The videos usually focus on the ships that are used as missiles, the so-called kamikaze drones, which explode upon contact with their target. This can consist of vehicles, radars, bunkers, and, of course, troops that are at the mercy of these silent hunters. But these machines, as automated as they may seem, have a human element that, for the moment, is necessary for their operation. As we mentioned, drone pilots play an increasingly important role in the war. They are highly trained operators to manipulate a hybrid between a miniature aircraft and a missile. Within the Ukrainian force, these positions are coveted for a clear reason. It is a job that is done in relative safety, but which still allows them to make a significant contribution in the fight against the Kremlin, riddling its soldiers at an increasingly accelerated pace. Next, we will accompany one of these mysterious operators as he flies over Andriivka, one of the many towns that were devastated by fighting with Russian forces.
Зараз ми підлітаємо безпосередньо на лінію розмежування. Прямо з FPV-шної камери можете побачити, наскільки тут від землі немає живого місця.
Suddenly, with the help of his team, this young pilot comes across a group of Russians advancing through this ruined and apocalyptic territory. As we previously indicated, when a drone detects you, you can run, but you will never be able to escape.
О, диви, бігають, світяться. Як красиво.
Boom, right on target. The camera screen was covered in black and white stripes, similar to those that used to appear on old tube televisions. The connection was lost, But that was not a bad sign, quite the opposite. It means that the drone successfully exploded in the back of a Russian armored vehicle, blowing the impacted area to pieces. The attack was probably not enough to completely destroy the vehicle, but it was enough to compromise its functionality or even seriously injure its occupants. It is a job well done by the operator, since with a plastic piece worth a few $1,000s, he managed to damage an expensive and tactically important vehicle. Let us pause for a moment on the young man behind the glasses and controls. As you may know, when the Russian invasion began, in February 2022, many people left their daily occupations to join the local resistance force. Professionals, farmers, police officers, and all kinds of workers were transformed overnight into soldiers. They did not have the technical or tactical training, but they did have the desire to fight. This was the case of this young man, only 20 years old, a biology student who earned the nickname Darwin in reference to the famous scientist who postulated the theory of the evolution of species. In some way, he is also part of an evolutionary process, although in the field of war. From surveillance devices to drones that release grenades and, finally, to flying kamikazes. Let's listen to how the young man explains the importance of these systems in the context of the invasion of his country.
Ціль, яка рухається, вважається практично тією, в яку не можна влучити. У нас, якщо ціль рухається, і ми знаходимося над нею, це ніякої ролі не грає.
One of the major complications of this conflict is that the fighting took place both in rural and remote areas, and in large cities full of houses and buildings. The latter is a challenge, as the structures are ideal hiding places for ambushes, snipers, and, today, drone operators. In the case of Ukraine, trying to repel the invader with bombs, missiles, or artillery would also mean destroying its own country. That is why explosive devices are presented as a much more precise option with less collateral damage for Kiev's troops.
Достатньо часто ворогом використовуються багатоповерхові будівлі в якості позиції для роботи. Але із дронами камікадзе, які є у нас, ці укриття перестають бути укриттями.
The problem is that unlike artillery munitions, Ukrainian remote-controlled drones cannot be mass-produced. Instead, they are the result of a fairly artisanal process carried out in government-controlled workshops, although there are also others carried out clandestinely by committed civilians. Each piece is built from available explosives that are then adapted to attack drones. In many cases, shells are taken from old Soviet RPGs and loaded onto plastic parts created using 3D printers. Basic tools, glue, and tape are used. The process may seem primitive, but the result is extremely lethal. As we mentioned earlier, Ukrainian pilots have combined cutting-edge technology with great creativity when it comes to assembling new destructive pieces. What you're seeing on screen is a device called Avada Kedavra. Yes, like Harry Potter's spell. But this drone built from an anti-tank missile charge has nothing magical about it. It is a crucial element to be able to attack the thousands of armored vehicles that the Kremlin has, and which have meant a brutal advantage during its invasion. Let's see this toy in action.
Дуже сильно броньовані, дійсно. Якщо використовувати звичайні боєприпаси, то вибухають вони доволі рідко. З такими штуками вибухають частіше. В порівнянні з артилерією і FPV. То, звісно, FPV буде сильно вигравати, це високоточна зброя.
Darwin insists that drones have a great advantage over artillery, and although his assessment may be controversial, since Russia has won several territories using this weapon, the truth is that Ukraine is in a very difficult context. It does not have the industrial capabilities of the Kremlin, and its production is cut short by the advance of the enemy. That is why drones are considered the best option for the troops in Kiev. These small unmanned aircraft have provided excellent results and have caused truly painful losses to the enemy. The most interesting thing is that these capabilities must be attributed both to the technology and to the pilots. People like Darwin, who carry out an impressive job. Seeing his workstation is impressive. The glasses can reach far beyond the limits of his bunker, allowing his mind to traverse the Ukrainian fields as if he were a falcon in full hunt. The controls generally resemble those used in video games. On the one hand, they are cheaper, but there is also a practical reason: the motor memory of many of the young operators. Because before the war, they were frequent users of these game consoles. The hellish context of the Russian invasion has allowed them to use the skills gained through years of gaming in a task that is not at all fun, but is very necessary for their country.
Плюс. Відпрацювали.
But beyond the distance and detachment that comes from fighting through checkpoints, Ukrainian soldiers are well aware that this is not a game. They understand that there are lives at stake, both their own and others, and that they must act with this enormous responsibility in mind. Let's listen to the reflections of Darwin, the star pilot of the Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Brigade of Ukraine.
Does it feel like a video game?
Ні, це не відчувається як відеогра, відчувається як змагання за власне життя і власну територію.
How many targets have you been able to hit?
За весь час скільки?
Do you keep score?
Ні.
Despite the interviewer's insistence, Darwin says that he does not keep track of the number of attacks he has carried out since the beginning of the conflict. Although it may seem strange, since we are used to snipers keeping a detailed record of the number of lives they have eliminated, you must bear in mind that the role of the drone pilot is different. His job is routine, tense, and he must use all his concentration in each of the flights, since the units that are put into service are difficult to build, and a wasted drone is a great material loss for Ukraine. He cannot be thinking about past or future cases, he must be focused on the present, hunting down that soldier who appears on the screen to eliminate him. For the Russians, drones have become a real nightmare. They are silent machines that appear when you least expect it, and thanks to their size and speed, they can chase you to the most inhospitable corners. They do not tire or have compassion, and worse still, every death they cause is recorded on camera. This is not a minor detail. Unmanned aircraft are both a weapon to annihilate enemies and a constant producer of propaganda content. In this way, fear is sown in the Kremlin troops and their confidence is destroyed. Darwin's experiences, although particular, can be applied to the rest of the Ukrainian drone pilots. Today, these solitary operators who work long hours inside secret bunkers are one of the most important pillars in the defense of their country. Beyond the result of this bloody conflict, the truth is that thanks to their spectacular performance, the future of war will not be the same. In this way, we come to the end of a video full of death captured on camera. The war in Ukraine continues, and we promise to update you with all the details. If you want to keep up to date with the news of this conflict, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications on our channel. Without further ado, we say goodbye until the next installment of Military Force. Thank you for joining us.